Hello Dabblers, today I'm bringing you the final Kings of War battle report from the Victorian Clash of Kings 2022 launch event. This one being a showdown between my Forces of the Abyss and Tim's Twilightkin. Just in case you're new to the channel, Couple of Dabblers involves my wife, Flo, and myself. She makes videos about stitching and I make videos about wargaming, primarily Kings of War. If you don't mind having one or the other appear in your subscription feed, then please subscribe. So it's been 2 months since this small tournament of 3 games of 2,000 points went down, and I'm sure you're all wondering, where is the final game? Well, I was on track to record this video right after the last report that came out in mid-January, when I suddenly realised the army list I had set for myself really needed to get painted, as I only had a week left before Clash of Kings 2022 Australia in Canberra. And it wasn't a small amount of painting either, because I'd gotten into my head that I wanted to try out the new formation for the Abyssals, and so this is one that involves a regiment and a horde of lower Abyssals, which I did not own. So I think it was in mid-December I had purchased said Abyssals. I already had a couple lying around left over from my Flamebearer regiments, and then I sent about putting them all together, painting them, and I've been doing them batches of 16, which was crazy because you end up painting just one thing for about 2 days, a hoof. But anyway, as I was painting these all up, I realized I only had 1 week to go and I still had about 32 to go, and so it just, the way it looked at my calendar, I was still working, so I was looking at all the time I had in the evenings, and it just physically could not be done that I could also paint and record and edit a video before Clash of Kings. So unfortunately this comes out after the big event in Australia, so it kind of is overshadowed by that. But we all want to see a battle report and see the end of this all, and so that is what I will bring to you today before I then set out on editing all the Clash of Kings 2022 Australia battle reports I've got. That's 6 of them, and that's going to be really fun, but it's going to take a long time. As you know, I'm pretty slow. So just in case you haven't been watching the first 2 videos of this one, which I highly recommend you should, because they help set up the context and the way I'm thinking and how I'm going, but this is a tournament of 3 games of 2,000 points that went across just the one day, and it was held up in Ringwood at the House of War in Melbourne, Australia. Now, this is the final game. I haven't had anything to eat so far because I was quite silly in thinking, I can definitely get away and have something to eat. But when you have games that go back to back, because the idea is that you start at 10 and you should be able to finish by 4. Having all these games back to back means that unless you're really losing fast or winning fast, you're not going to go out and get anything, even though the cafes are quite close by. But I hadn't taken this into account, and so I was getting very hungry by this point, but I was still really enjoying myself, because that's the game that is Kings of War. But next time I will pack a lunch, maybe like 3 or 4 sandwiches, just to keep me going across the day. So highly recommend for people who are going to a tournament and they're not sure how it might go in terms of food. But anyway, so let's get into the army lists. So my army list already been talked about twice before, and I'll do it one more time, but a bit faster. So we've got 2 Abyssal Guard regiments, nice little anvils, little because they're quite compact, and then we've got my bigger anvil being the Abyssal Ghouls Horde, being given the healing brew. Why? Well, that's because of the Zazuzu down below, who will be damaging them throughout the game. I'll talk about that later. Then I have a troop of gargoyles, which I'm using as chaff, and I'm still figuring that out. In this battle report, definitely looking back at it. Oh, jeez. Flamebearers regiment, just for a little bit of shooting. 10 Flamebearer shots are always helpful. Then I have a horde of tortured souls, an Abyssal Horseman regiment with the brew of sharpness to make them extra spicy. So the tortured souls and the Abyssal Horsemen are my main, hammers. One better than the other, but the tortured souls are still pretty good because they fly, right? And then finally I have the Cronius with his Drain Life 8, which by this point I'm realizing was a bit of a mistake including, because very rarely do I get it to go off. Because, it does have that 6-inch range, and if the Cronius is 6 inches in range of anything, he's usually in combat with it, not really just sitting there casting spells. So it's making, he's not expensive, but it's making him very expensive when you chuck that on, because it is 30 points. And then I have an Abyssal Fiend for a source of inspiring, as well as the Manifestation of Baal, who is he can do nearly anything. He's got this lightning bolt. He can fly. He's got 7 attacks at crushing 2. He's a very good little demon monster. And finally, there's Uzu the Betrayer, who I really like because he has not only just a Lightning Bolt 4 and Bane Chant 2, both very good spells that don't really come with the normal Warlock, but he has the ability to pump them up to a maximum of 4 extra dice if he selects a target unit nearby that will get damaged for every success he makes. So that's usually always the Abyssal Ghouls, hence they have the Healing Brew to just mitigate some of that damage that they'll be taking early on in the game. So yeah, that's my list. To see how it's performed in the first 2 games, go watch those. The first one was against Salamanders and the second was against Northern Alliance. And I won't spoil them here, but I did lose one and I did win one. So find out for yourself if you're keen to watch those as well. They're similar format to this. Now onto my opponent's list, Tim, and his Twilight Kin of 2,000 points. So this is the first time I've ever gone against Twilight Kin, but thankfully they're made up of 2 factions that I'm very familiar with. We have the Forces of the Abyss units, and we also have Night Stalker units that are both Crone-bound, which means that they get some of the bonuses that are given by some of the units, such as the Summoner Crone's ability to do her Enhance Drain Life. So starting this list off, we have 2 regiments of Impalers, one of which has the Helm of the Drunken Ram. So these Impalers are already quite punchy because they got their 15 attacks at crushing 1, but you give them a Helm of the Drunken Ram, and that makes them even better. It gives them Thunderous Charge 1, or +1, but they cannot gain the benefits of Pathfinder. So this is a special new item from Clash of Kings 2022 that you use to give to a unit that doesn't have Pathfinder, never will, because you don't want to take away their Pathfinder. And so the idea is you're then giving them Thunderous Charge 1 that you have to make sure you get by, dodging terrain and setting up proper charges. Then we have Blade Dancer Neophytes Horde. So this is with Makwa's Potion of the Caterpillar. So the Blade Dancer Neophytes are actually a new unit as well, in the way that the Blade Dancers always existed, but the Neophytes are just a slightly worse version of that, so they're slightly less punchier, which makes them a bit cheaper, so you can have a whole horde of them. And I assume putting some terrain mitigation, such as the Pathfinder item, is there to just make sure that they can march up through things and charge through things, and since they're a horde, it just means that they're more likely to hit terrain anyway. Next up are 2 regiments of Crone-bound Butchers. So these are large infantry, but they are very tough because they're defense 5 and stealthy, so you can't shoot them off very easily, and so you have to get into combat with them, which is exactly what Chaff wants. They just want you to hit them at the wrong angle and all that kind of stuff. But unlike regular Chaff, these guys are crushing 2, so and 9 attacks, they actually will hurt if they hit you in the right flank or side, rear, whatever, so you can't just ignore them either. So this is an interesting choice of Chaff, and I wish I had something like this. I guess I could take regiments of Molochs, I suppose, but they could definitely be shot off. Anyway, thought experiment aside, we then move on to Crone-bound Abyssal Horsemen, a regiment of these, which I'm very familiar with, and these have Sir Jesse's Boots of Striding, which help them, obviously, they have Strider once per game. Then we have 2 Mind Screechers, so the Crone-bound Mind Screech, and these are just fantastic units. I think you've seen them in action before in my previous battle reports, but these are those height 5 floating monsters that can shoot out Lightning Bolt 6. They also have Wind Blast. They also have something else that I don't think I've ever seen cast, but generally people cast Lightning Bolt, and then also Wind Blast, because a cheeky Wind Blast can definitely change the entire game. Then we have a Crone-bound Archfiend of the Abyss. And when I saw this Archfiend of the Abyss, which the model is very cool, I'll show you later, it just made me nostalgic for my own Archfiend of the Abyss. Because I've got an Abyssal Fiend in here, but he's just not quite the same, He just hasn't got Nimble, he hasn't got Speed 10, he's only got 7 attacks and Crushing 2. It's just, the Archfiend of the Abyss, he is quite a lot more expensive, like a lot more expensive than the Abyssal Fiend, but he has just so much more majesty, and when he goes down and flies around, it's like really quite terrifying. So it's, I saw this and I respected it. Then finally we have 2 more Twilight Kin units. We have the Summoner Crone with the Conjurer's Staff. So the Summoner Crone, for those not familiar, it's a kind of witch unit that has Drain Life, just comes with a Drain Life 6. But the Twilight Kin special Drain Life means that even though they can only, drain health from an enemy unit within 6 inches, they can then bestow that health on something up to 18 inches away, as long as it has the Crone-bound keyword, so that you can see there's a lot of Chromebound in this list, and a lot of things that would definitely benefit from a bit of healing. So it's a really cool enhancement to Drain Life that doesn't really break the damage aspect of it, because it's still 6-inch range, but it does enhance the healing aspect. So it's a really it's just a very good spell. And then finally we have Mikael, Lord of Nightmares, and he really is the Lord of Nightmares. He has all kinds of special rules, but namely, so he hits quite hard already as an individual, so he's still he's a small dude on a mount, and he has a lot of things that help him hit hard, high crushing strength and all that, but really what makes him good is that he has a special ability, the Sword of Umbra, that allows him to double his attacks not only against heroes, but also monsters and titans. So it's kind of like Duelist, if Duelist wasn't just for individuals, but instead were for half the things in the game, especially half the things in my army, and so that is quite terrifying. But as I have said in my previous one, I didn't quite read that far down. As I was reading through the list, I'm like, oh yeah. Got to Mikael, Lord of Nightmares, and I just thought individual. Oh, okay, cool. So he's a little combat character. So pays to read, especially the things you really don't know. And I really didn't know Mikael, Lord of Nightmares. Otherwise, I should have given him the attention that he deserves, because you'll find later in this game, a little spoiler, but not major, nothing actually that changes the game, but I did kind of ignore him a bit and allow him to do some things that I shouldn't have. And so now, when someone puts down Mikael, I will definitely give him respect and go the other way, because I don't really have anything that can take him down very quickly. That is quite tricky to take him down, because he's also quite tough. He's got quite high nerve and a good solid defense off defense 5. So that's his army, and being a bit drained, wasn't really having much of an idea how to fight this, but we'll see as we get into the scenario and deployment. So the scenario for the final round of this tournament was one that's actually a bit of a brain breaker when it comes to round 3 of a tournament, and it's right after the Melbourne lockdown. So I hadn't played on a clock for a very long time. In terms of the previous tournament was in March, so playing on the clock was not something I was used to, and I was getting slower now because I hadn't had lunch, which was stupid. I should have brought a sandwich. So key thing, if you don't have a lunch break, bring a sandwich so you can eat on the go. But in any case, Salt the Earth is one that's more complicated, not so much in the fact that there's objective markers. That's simple. You have the 7 objective markers, one has to go in the middle, and then each player has 3 each that they can place, and they alternate placing these down. So you can see that we've got a nice spread around the battlefield in the red circles. Some in my half and some in his half, probably slightly more in his half, but yeah. What makes this different, though, is these are not normal objective markers, because the Salt the Earth component means that you can destroy them at the end of your turn if you control them. And the idea of what makes this different from all the other objective marker kind of base scenarios is that identifying the moment in which you can destroy them can be key to winning, because there are so many objectives. You've got 7. When should you destroy them? That will give you the advantage that that they won't end up getting it, because obviously you might be controlling it at that point, but you have to see kind of into the future a bit and predict where their units might end up, what charges might occur, and who would control that in the end, and identify that is something that might be worth destroying. So these scenarios, probably the second time I've ever played this scenario. I've only played now about 24 games, so this one hasn't come up very often. It's just, you roll the dice, and if there's 12 scenarios, 24 games, chances are max you'll have, on average, should play them about 2 each. And so this is the second time I'm playing this, and yeah, figuring out when to burn them, as we say, we burn the token, that is tricky, but it can definitely help you win if you can whittle down how many available tokens there are, and then concentrate on the ones that you can get. So then that brings us to the deployment. So what we have off screen here is an Archfiend that shouldn't be that far up. He did not scout. He started at the deployment line, and he had just begun his movement phase. And I was just getting a bit slower by now, and I was like, oh, need a picture of the battlefield, quick. So I took a picture, and not even the best one. You can see how quick I took it. I didn't even make sure that everything was in. So that was there, and he's already started to move. So that's a bit of a spoiler for turn 1, sorry. But we'll go with the rest of his army's deployment after that. So we've got that's a Chrome-bound Archfiend, because that's what the Twilight can have. And then we've got our Chrome-bound Mind Screechers, one here and one here. And they're really cool looking models. They look like the Demogorgons from
The Stranger Things, lots of teeth, big maw that opens up in multiple directions, super cool. And also what's super cool is that every base, the multi-basing technique he's got here, is not lava. It could have been lava, but instead it's rocks on like blood, like just gore and blood. Like it's red. It's got texture, kind of weirdly. Like so, it's not just a pool of blood. That would just be red and boring and glossy. But no, it's like a gory pool of blood. So there's stuff in it that has texture, and so he made it just look awesome. If we when we go to take a look at the Archfiend, it's actually got bits of blood rising out to kind of denote the power of it pulling the blood up. Anyway, you'll see that. So moving right along, after gushing about the amazing looking multi-basing in this army, we have 2 regiments of Impalers, you can see there, so with their spears, and then in front of those, the thick chaff is the Butcher regiment. Then moving further along to the right, this chap here turned sideways, that's Mikhail. And he is turned sideways because he can have his free pivot and then move, and that should actually give him free movement because he's so long, which is which is interesting. That's something that's actually was done. I remember in 7th edition, 40,000. It doesn't matter. You could do it with tanks, and it was a little bit silly. Then we have this big horde of the Blade Dancer Neophytes. So that's actually a new unit. So it's like the Blade Dancers, but they're in a horde. So that's what we got there. And then we have our second thick chaff of Butcher regiments right there. And the little lonely character here on the right, that is the Summoner Crone. And finally, we have the Abyssal Horseman, also looking very cool over there. So that is the deployment of his army. And so the way I deployed in return, and this is something that I've just been getting into a habit now, is identifying where are the blocking terrains and how can I use them to our advantage. So you can see here I've used this blocking terrain, this big ruin thing, and put the majority of my army to the right of it, where I've got 3 objectives in front of me that I hope to capture. And then the rest of my army on the other side to the left. And these are the faster components that I know I can redeploy. So I kind of put some of these out first and to try and spread out the forces arrayed before me, but then concentrated heavily over here. So from in the faster contingent, we've got the gargoyles right on the left. That was dangerous. In hindsight, I probably shouldn't have put them right on the left. I probably should have put them here, maybe. But I don't think I saw the Mind Screechers yet. But all it takes is a single shot from Mind Screechers, and goodbye gargoyles. So they should be behind the Tortured Souls, and then at least they might be out of range. But then, yes, we have the horde of Tortured Souls right there, and then the manifestation of Baal. So these are all pretty maneuverable. The Tortured Souls are the slowest of the bunch, that's for sure. They've only got the 1 pivot and speed 8, so they do take their sweet time to get around, but overall, they can still redeploy to a certain degree. Then we have the horde of Abyssal Ghouls that act as a battery for here, Zazi Boy. And next to Zazi Boy is the Sharpness Horses, the Abyssal Horsemen right there. Then next to those Abyssal Ghouls, we have the Abyssal Guard, and Acronius, and another Abyssal Guard. So it's a good pattern to have. The Acronius can heal either or. And behind those, another Sorcerer Inspiring is the Abyssal Fiend. Finally, on the far right, occupying my flank, are the Flamebearers, just there to start shooting. So I put these guys over here. The idea was that I might have enough shooting, just enough, to take off the Blade Dancer Neophytes, because they are defense 3, and their base is so big that there's no way I can't not be shooting them. So the idea is, hopefully, over the course of the game, I will remove them. And so that's kind of my plan with the shooting here. Every time I put down my army, I try and pick a unit in the opponent's army, either based on availability in terms of deployment or just what I see in the list, and that is what I'm going to be shooting. And even though this army definitely doesn't have much like shooting, it's definitely got enough when it comes to defense 3, because that is very enticing. So I picked that as something that I needed to remove because it has a lot of unit strength, and it's actually still pretty punchy because they hit on 3s with elite, 25 attacks. It's still nasty. So yeah, that's what I identified as something worth removing. Especially when, what other things you have to choose from. You've got bloody Butchers with stealthy, and you have, and they're defense 5, so you're not even going to try. And then you also have the Abyssal Horsemen who can just regenerate in their defense 5. So, you pick the best of what you've got. So yeah, that's my deployment. And so the plan is that Archfiend I knew was going to be coming around, and I was going to redeploy the left flank so that there wasn't much for him to charge, and just kind of delay the impact that the Archfiend will have on the game, and deal with the rest of his army. So we'll see how this goes, starting with turn 1 that went to the Twilight Kin, which you already knew because you saw the Archfiend. I'm an idiot. So there it is, there's the Archfiend. Isn't it cool? Oh, look, so you see that it's actually the Avatar of Khaine model that comes with the Blood Cauldron kit. Yes, the Blood Cauldron of, so that comes with, which is for the Daughters of Khaine from Age of Sigmar, which before that was obviously the Dark Elves, but it's from the Daughters of Khaine, and so it's awesome plastic model. And what he's got it's kind of, I think it's on a rod, so that it looks like it's just floating there with arms outstretched, looking freaky. And I don't know if you can identify here, but there's these kind of columns of blood, so it looks like the gore is kind of being pulled up by his power. Imagine he's like kind of god level, and he's just floating around looking creepy, and he's going to slay things, and he constantly floats. So very cool Abyssal Archfiend model, especially in the context of this bloody army. Get it? Huh? Bloody army? Yeah, so he turned after doing his 20-inch move to look down my flank and see what problems he could cause. Then the rest just kind of moves up. So we've got the Thick Chaff and the Impalers moving up. The Mind Screechers move up just a little bit, but he's quite tentative because he doesn't want to get charged. Even if it's by gargoyles, that's enough to just, stop him shooting for a while. On the right, we then see the rest of the army moving up gradually as well. So these guys have come down for the hill. The horsemen are just steadily moving forward. Nothing going crazy because he doesn't want to get charged. Not that I have anything fast in my front line, as he can move up completely, but he's limited by the forest here in terms of this side, and the horsemen don't want to be outranging too much, because I think he's also thinking about the 18-inch shooting of my flame bearers. So zooming out, that's what we can see in terms of the army. So yeah, it's just everything moving forward, a simple turn 1. What do you expect? So we went to Lightning Bolt my gargoyles, and what we're seeing here, I think, is this one that was the only one that had range. And I don't normally take pictures of dice rolls, and the problem is I can't see what's on the dice, but the only time I ever take pictures of dice rolls is when they're exceptionally something, like good or bad. And in this case, it must have been exceptionally bad because there's no wounds were put on the gargoyles, so there was a sad lightning bolt right there. Wow, wow. Turn 1 for me. How do I react? Well, you can see I kind of just condensed myself a bit. Oh, suddenly all my army is in one picture. So what I've done is I have moved everything slightly up, the right flank more than the left, so that I can pull these things in. Because my idea, and remember, I'm kind of losing blood sugar here. I'm not really capable of thinking too much, but I can see there's Abyssal Horsemen, so I just thought, all right, Abyssal Horsemen, I'm going to get right into your charge range. So that's the idea. I've moved up with both. Maybe I shouldn't have. But once I moved up with these guys, the Abyssal Guard, I then also needed to move up with the Flame Bearers because I wanted to get some range and start shooting this horde of neophytes. So it was an imperative that I moved them up so that they could shoot them, but it just means now they're in range of the horsemen. But if it can be effective enough to remove them, then that's good enough for me. The rest of the army just moves up together. We're trying to get past this blocking terrain so that the Archfiend that's coming in won't have such an easy time of charging. So as long as we can move up there, and I've got Zazie right here ready to use the battery that is his nearby Abyssal Ghouls to pump up his lightning bolt, and I've also got Baels just snuck in here. So that's what I've done. You see that whole left flank is just kind of contracted. So because I've got 2 Mind Screechers over there, I've got the Archfiend. This is more than what that flank could hold. Baels, he's pretty good. He's got defense 5, but the defense 4 Tortured Souls, it takes just maybe 2 rounds of lightning bolt, and they're definitely gone. One lightning bolt, like of 6, can just remove the gargoyles, so that could all get destroyed by those, and they don't need to be there. Like, what are they going to do? I could I could try and chase down those Mind Screechers, but that's just silly. So I decided to leave the Mind Screechers to where they are. It's probably not a great idea. Because you don't want to leave them there because they still are unit strength 1. They can take those objectives, but I didn't want to lose these units because even chasing after them, they will get 1 round of shooting, maybe 2, and I'll be dead because they could just waver me. Especially they could kill the gargoyles. They could waver. Well, you can't waver the Tortured Souls. So perhaps in hindsight, I should have sent them that way, but what I was seeing was this Archfiend coming in. I couldn't get out of its flanks, so I moved everything in. So the way that those Tortured Souls got there is they kind of slid sideways. So they don't have a double pivot, but they can slide sideways 4 inches. So that's what they did, and the Gargoyles in here to act as chaff instead for this whole battle line. So yeah, and we can see the Cronius has moved up to the wall, that obstacle, and so has the Fiend. The Cronius is Strider, so he's good behind obstacles. I like identifying an obstacle and be like, Cronius, you go there, because he doesn't care. And if he stands there, he can also take charges, and most things will be hindered going in. And this is just taking a picture to show how far I've moved away. So I'm definitely outside of the charge range of that Archfiend, so it's going to have to just march up some more, and I'm out of Lightning Bolt range, I think, unless he moves up a bit more to try and get onto my Tortured Souls. So I got 4 damage with the combined Lightning Bolt and Fire Bolts onto the Neophytes, because I think it definitely would have been cover, just the way that the Butchers are in front of them, so that's alright, 4 damage. And then Baal didn't have much left to shoot at, so he just shot at the Impalers that he could see on the other side of that forest. So yeah, that's some alright shooting. 3 damage there, pretty good. So that's the end of my turn. So it's turn 2 for the Twilightkin. So the advance continues of the Twilightkin. We have the Archfiend coming up, essentially threatening the flank of my Tortured Souls, who will most certainly pivot to face him. Then we also have the Mind Screechers coming in so they can get some range, and we've got the Impalers just moving up gradually, and we have the Butcher Horde screening Mikael behind them, so that we're going to get lots of charges off. So that's what's going on this. On this side, we can see that the Butcher Horde has now moved into the forest so that they can actually see properly, and then the Horde of Neophytes right behind them, Summoner Crone, and Abyssal Horseman. So still a tentative turn 2, no actual engagement. Now I think what I've done in this picture is now that there is 3 damage from that lightning, so that's what this picture actually was for, was because he's doing lightning bolts. So there was a total of 3 damage on my Tortured Souls, which they can certainly weather. So that's quick turns, right? It's just movement and a little bit of shooting. So turn 2 to me. What am I going to do in response? Well, I, for one, first turn these Tortured Souls, so they're not going to be getting flanked by anything. Thank you very much. Although I doubt they can take the Archfiend and Butchers into the front. And I don't think Mikael can go in because there's not enough frontage now that we've got this blocking terrain here, but there's definitely not enough space. Not enough nerve on these guys to take all those things at once, because the Archfiend and the Butchers will be wounding on 2s. So even though they only have 9 attacks each, that's 18 attacks that will ultimately be wounding on 2s. That's going to be a lot. But they've turned anyway, and maybe they'll last. But interestingly, what I have done now is I have turned the Horseman that way. So were he to charge right in, now the Horseman would get the charge on whatever I liked, be it the Butchers or the Archfiend. So the idea is that I'm like, hey, you can take these guys out, sure, but you're going to get Sharpness horses in the front, and very little can survive Sharpness horses when they're not hindered. So that's turning this way. And they're not really going to do anything on this side yet anyway. The Abyssal Ghouls are very much in the way, which is obviously what they're supposed to do, but there's no room. I've really packed myself in here, so the Horsemen won't be able to do much on this side anyway, so they might as well be keeping an eye on the Archfiend and keeping it, wary of this 16-inch charge I have of these guys. So everything else has moved up the entire line, so now it's all in line, which is aesthetically pleasing. And I've moved up the Gargoyles here because this is my actual first tournament, or first few games I've been taking Gargoyles. I don't really know how to use them, because what I've done, I've put them up, and I put them there because I'm like, oh, don't charge me with your Abyssal Horseman, oh no, but why am I scared about Abyssal Horseman charging to my Abyssal Guard or whatever? So I put them there early, when really that's not when they should go. They should be staying behind and then going out later. And This is only me talking after, because this has taken me so long to get around to recording it. I've actually gone to Clash of Kings Australia and done 6 games. And I tell you, 6 games against these amazing people to play against. Like, everyone's playing so clean and tight. It was really good. And so I learned a lot of stuff, and I've learned how chaff should work. And it's not like this. You don't just... Yeah, anyway. Looking at past JP, me, putting these gargoyles like right there, I'm like, what are you trying to save? Why? So anyway, that's me being annoyed. I was thinking those Abyssal Horsemen are scary, but they would be charging by themselves, so they were not that scary. And even if they were, they can't like go through the army from that point onwards, because the width here is not enough for an Abyssal Horseman unit to pass through, like if somehow that was to happen. So I was dumb, and I should have kept those gargoyles for longer, such as, keeping it here to protect when I'm starting to do my punching back. That's what you do. Anyway, you might have learned something from my ramblings, for some of the people that don't know how to use gargoyles. But I think everyone knows how to use gargoyles except me, so I'm catching up. Give me some time. So, what else has happened that's interesting? Well, now I've brought Baal properly over here, so he could do another 10-inch move, pivot again, and now he can bring his lightning bolt to bear on the neophytes, as can Zazie, and we still have the flame bearers. So now I've got all 3 of my shooting units ready to shoot those neophytes, and that's kind of what I wanted. It just took me 2 turns to get here. So that's all the movement there, I believe. So going to that shooting, whoa! I killed it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there was a bit of cover for some of the units shooting. So Zazie, he's only height 3, so he can shoot over them, but he still gets cover. Yeah, he still has that -1 from the cover, and yeah, Baal's height 4, so he still gets it as well. But weight of 5, so you got lightning bolt in total 15, because 8 from Zazuzu, 7 from Baal, so lightning bolt 8, that's a lot. So that can dish out some damage. I must have spiked. I didn't take pictures of my rolling because I was on the clock, and I started realizing that I just need to keep playing the game. But then the flame barrels on top was enough. They were gone with their double roll. So yeah, I was quite pleased about that. So then what the hell was I doing with these gargoyles then? I don't know. And this is just a note how exceptional. So obviously I must have hit with a lot, because if you're not familiar with the betrayal ability of Zazuzu and what makes him good is because, the normal Warlock comes with a built-in shooting attack. That's his 5 Firebolt. So they're range 18, piercing 1. It's pretty good. It's what the Flame Bearers have. But the problem is just, it's just the Firebolts. Obviously they're affected by stealthy and all things like that, whereas Lightning Bolt, which is what Zazuzu has, he's a living legend warlock, he has a built-in Lightning Bolt 4, I've mentioned this before, but he's got that amazing Lightning Bolt 4 that can be pumped up, and every hit that he gets with that pumped up Lightning Bolt up to +4 does a damage. So I've got 7 damage on here, so he must have done exceptionally well this round with his hits. So these ghouls have probably only got 1 more crazy Lightning Bolt left in them before I'll have to stop. Because the idea is you have to know when to stop ripping out of those ghouls. But that's it. I shot some units. No charges yet. Now it's turn 3 for the Twilight. And I've start with what I have written right here to remind me to tell you guys, because you can't see it because I didn't take a picture. But the Abyssal Horsemen have charged the Flame Bearers, because he identified that correctly as, a flanking unit that he could take out on the charge, because they're defense 3, 13, 15, thank you. So he could kill them and then just turn and face the flank of my army. So very smart indeed. And then see how dumb. The gargoyles went up here, and the way I placed them, well, I think it's because I had to move 20 from there anyway, or it was a double pivot already to get that direction. In any case, it resulted in them getting flanked by the butchers, so they're definitely dead. Butchers in the front, maybe they survive. The butcher regiment only has 9 attacks, it hits on 4s, so there's every chance that they'll just do dismally and do 1-2 damage and not be able to get rid of them. But if you get them in the flank, yeah, definitely going to get rid of them. So I just gave him those gargoyles, which is silly. They're very cheap, but it's still silly. And then we have here the hindered charge of the Impalers into the front of my ghouls right there, and Mikael has thought, I don't need to be around here, I'm going to zip in here. I'll speak properly. I don't need to be on the other side of that blocking terrain and help with this fight. That's what the butchers have got with the tortured souls. He wants to come on this side and really cause some havoc, because he is so powerful. So I got to watch out for him. And yeah. So that's what's happened here. We've got charges going all over the place. But no one's charging my Abyssal Guard. So if these guys weren't here, maybe I would have instead had a double charge on the ghouls with the impalers and the butchers, which is might be enough to break them. But that's kind of what they're for. And then my horsemen might have been able to deal with it, or something like that. Or then the Abyssal Guard will be able to engage. But so the way it kind of turned out is it's just the gargoyles really could have been a utility that I could have retained. So over here, those butchers going in do a total of 4 damage because they already had 3 on them, so that's pretty impressive. And so if you're wondering what the Archfiend is doing, he didn't charge in. Instead, just moved up out of the arc of these tortured souls. Not that he's to worry, I'm not going to be able to kill these things. And unsurprisingly, the butchers take no time removing the gargoyles. But surprisingly, the Impalers didn't do all that much damage. But, when you're hindered, it just kind of reduces your damage potential. So it was only 4 damage that went onto the Abyssal Ghouls. But, here we go, now we've got the picture. We can see that they had no trouble taking out my Flame Bearers destroyed, which is expected. 18 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 2s. No worries. And so the idea was he was going to turn them, but he could not. Because what happened, and so this is a very painful lesson for him, but it's a lesson for all of us. Don't put your characters right behind after a charge, because if you want to do something like, hey, reform, he can't because he's wider than he is. He's wider than he is deep. So when he turns to on the spot, it's going to be on top of his crone. So he cannot turn at all, really. It's because she is flush. She went right up there. Obviously, she didn't want to get charged by Abyssal Guard, so that makes sense. She needs to get out of the way, out of arcs, especially, it's not so much the Abyssal Guard, but we've got this Archfiend here, normal fiend here, so he was working hard to get out of that, but yeah, it's just kind of stymied him, so that's all he can do. And so he thought, well, make the best of a bad situation, just trundle on forwards. And he rolled high enough, thankfully, that he didn't remain in the arcs of my Abyssal Guard to get a flank of them. I mean, Abyssal Guard in the flank isn't terrible. They only got 24. They got 12 attacks, so it become 24. There's no crushing, but still, it's a lot of damage that you wouldn't want to receive. Because these guys normally don't much damage, but if they're getting in the flank, of course they're going to do something. And that just gives it time for everything else to then power up. So he was lucky that he managed to roll far enough forward that he doesn't get deleted next turn, but now everything can be brought to bear to turn to him, and then he has to turn to face me, and then I get the charge. So that's how that story goes. But you can already figure that out yourself. So now it's for turn 3 for me, and that is exactly what happens. So now you can see where that Archfiend is because I finally included him in a photo. So he has moved a bit laterally to get more of my flank there, and my horsemen. You may notice they've just moved back a little bit further. So what I'm doing is I'm measuring the range of he's got 20-inch charge, he's a speed 10 flyer. So he's got 20. He's obviously trying to stay out of my 16. And then I just move, he's staying out of my 16. So if I move 4 inches backwards, which is, half speed, I'm going to be outside 20. So forever I can actually keep doing this. I can move out. Because I don't know, maybe I was overreacting because I think I can take a charge of an Abyssal Fiend because yes, he's wounding on 2s, but it's still only 9 attacks, so very easily he could do nothing, and then I get to hit him back with my 2+ to hit attacks. So perhaps I should have let him get it, but it was kind of funny that I could just, move back 4 inches, just +4 on that 16. He's already away from me, just outside 16, so let's say 16.1, so then I become 20.1, so I'm out of range. So at least in this instance, I thought this was funny because he still doesn't have, he's in the flank of the ghouls, so obviously he can't fit in there, so he can't charge the ghouls. He might be able to charge these guys if he needs to, if they're still there, but he also doesn't want to because then it'll be him in range of the horsemen. So right now, for the next turn, he can't have a target on anything I've got. So, that's pretty helpful. Now, what I've done over here for movement is I've charged that exposed crone. So The downside of him rolling really hot and getting these guys out of the way is that they were blocking the line of sight for these Abyssal Guard to see the crone, so I've just charged off to hopefully kill her, and then I've turned my monsters, Baal and the Fiend, to face the cavalry there that are now sitting there. So yeah, that's kind of the plan there, is to double charge them next turn. What I've done here is I've double charged the Regiment of Butchers with the Cronius, the big green guy here, and the Abyssal Guard, so they just kind of swung in to hopefully remove them, and then from that move on to these Impalers who are still just trying to push into these ghouls. And then Zazuzu is just sitting there, and I think he's going to Bane Chant them. That's probably what I had in mind. I just didn't really move him, and just decided, yeah, let's Bane Chant. So that's kind of the situation here, and obviously just going with a counter charge for the Tortured Souls because they ain't got nimble, so they can't really do all that much. Beyond just smash right back in, get their life leech, and heal up a little bit, But now they're on 7 wounds. Next turn, maybe even more. And so yes, this is for now my Bane Chant token. I've actually made a little Bane Chant token since then, but I use I use the misfire on the artillery dice from good old Warhammer Fantasy as my Bane Chant denoter. Stick that there, so I've got Bane Chant on them, so hopefully I can do some damage back. They hit on 5s, but there's 25 attacks, so roughly should hit, with I don't know, 7 of them, and then wounding on 3s is much better. Might actually be able to do some damage, but probably not get rid of them. And you can see that charge better here. But what I think I've done here in order to have 1 damage on me is I think I chose myself as a source. Yeah, because it doesn't really matter, so I betrayed myself. Or maybe I didn't. It might have been an earlier drain life from that crone. I'm trying to think, and I can't think of what caused it. So I'm just going to have to look a little bit silly. But I've got damage there, 1 damage on Zazuzu. And this is showing that while I did manage to do some damage to the crone, I didn't kill it, which is really annoying. I mean, it's 12, like I said, it's 12 attacks. It's not that much. And the crone's not tough, but I just kind of fluffed it, because when the lower attacks you have, it's the heavier impact that any kind of skew can have. And, that's why monsters are always a bit finicky. Once you get to like a 7 attack monster, it's never guaranteed that it's going to do amazing. Yeah, so that's just showing the damage counter there. Over here, I managed to damage them quite a bit. It's double digits, so that's pretty good, which, makes sense. This guy's got d6 plus 6 attacks, and he's got 12, so it's definitely a certain amount. And it was enough to remove them so that now I can get on forward. And what I'm doing is I'm seeing some of these tokens, and I'm like, tasty tokens, time to go get them. And that's what the Abyssal Guard Regiment was also looking to do. Over here, do some damage. No, I didn't do any. Yeah, this is a picture. Look, see? Told you, I take pictures when I see dice, and you might notice. What are here? 1s and 2s and 3s and 1s and 1s and 3s and 1, 1, 3, 3. What are we looking at? We are looking at 18 attacks, absolutely failing. No damage. No damage on those butchers. So I didn't even get my life leech back. That life leech 2. It's not hard, just 2 damage. I'm hitting on 4s, so yeah, granted, not great. But then I'm wounding on 4s because I've got my crushing 1. So I should at least get 4, 3? No, but 0. So that's not good. They definitely won't be able to weather any return strikes. They didn't get to heal whatsoever. So on to turn 4 with that happy note, with the Twilight King. So the turn 4 sees that double charge eventuate. So my reward for not doing anything to these, let alone removing them, is now I've got 2 units going into my Tortured Souls, and they definitely can't weather that. And the Archfiend has moved up just a bit, so you can guess that he's outside the 16 of the Abyssal Horsemen, but he's still in the flank of my Abyssal Ghouls, so he can't get a rear on them. So that's pretty good. Over here, the Mind Screechers are moving up further. But they've got nothing to do because the Mind Screechers are out of range of everything, but you can note that some of the tokens have disappeared because he has been burning them. I didn't talk about that before. But yeah, he's obviously chosen to burn these distant tokens and then come in and grab all the other ones. So that's pretty smart. Not that I can really contest them because I killed my gargoyles. If I kept my gargoyles, it would be much better. Now we can see on this clock is that I'm getting down in time, because not only am I getting slow, I'm taking pictures slowly, and I'm doing silly things like generally do not take too many pictures when it's your turn. Do all your rolls that you need to do in a phase, then take a picture to show the aftermath and hope that you can figure out what happened when you're looking at it. But I was for instance, when I rolled all the Tortured Souls dice, I was taking a picture of it, which is fair enough. It was terrible, but that's just 10 seconds getting that picture ready that I didn't need to do. So my time is definitely dropping down. Now this was the most surprising thing. So I didn't move Zazzy Boy because I just thought he just needs to be here and Banechant them. But what I didn't think of is that this Mikhail guy, he's an individual. So already, yeah, very nimble and stuff, but he's very thin, he's slender. So he was here, like that. And so what he did is he pivoted. He could see, because he's height 3, he can see my height 3, he can see over that. And, he's got, as most cavalry does, he's like speed 8, speed 9, I think he's speed 8. So he could definitely just go right around like a knight in chess and hit my Zazzy Boy. I mean, it doesn't matter, he's individual, thankfully, but he can do a lot of damage. He's very powerful, so he's still going to go in and destroy him, and that's not so. I didn't identify that at all. I didn't see that we had this gap right here. How I could have blocked it up, I don't think I could have. The only thing I could have done to prevent that is get him out of the two pivots that he could do. So for instance, if instead he was here in this gap between the Abyssal Ghouls and the Abyssal Guard, if he was there, then there is no way he could turn, and then he'd have to do one more turn to get there. He'd be safe. He'd still be in range, but he couldn't do anything. And I should have seen that, the individual kind of charge like that right through that little gap, because you normally think, yeah, units can't take advantage of the gap. That's true. A normal, like, when I say unit, I mean like a blob of dudes. I think that's it. I've blocked it up, but I can't stop this slender little character from getting through. And so that's what he's gone and done, and I applaud him for it. And it's going to make me think about that a lot more when I'm thinking stuff is out of charge, because I didn't even consider that as a charge, a possible one, and so that was silly. And so over here, the summoner Crone has just moved around and is currently in no one's arcs. Because I thought she'd be dead, so I didn't have anything ready to cover her in case she survived. So ideally, probably what I should have done is had Baal, perhaps, because I turned him a full 90 degrees when he moved up there, but maybe I didn't need to. Maybe I could have had him just facing this way, so that there was no way that she could get out of the charge arcs. Not that I wanted to not double charge these guys, because the Abyssal Fiend by himself is definitely not going to do enough damage, because only 7 attacks, so he needs another. But it would have been good to just have that threatening, so he's like, oh, I don't want to move it there, and maybe move it somewhere else. But it doesn't really matter. She's but one small character in the whole scheme of things, and I'll just let her live for now. So what this slightly blurry picture is showing, because the camera auto-focused on the giant piece of terrain right in the middle, is that I'm trying to show the Mind Screech shooting at the Abyssal Ghouls. And what I didn't mention is that I did a free reform with the Abyssal Ghouls to face the other way, so that they don't get, reared by an Archfiend. So that's the way that they're facing, but they got shot with a lightning bolt, and so what that managed to do was a blurry. I think we're up to 10 wounds. Because before they were, I think, at 7. So now they're, getting into a danger zone, and that definitely means I can't use them for more if Zazuzu were to survive, which is unlikely. Over here, unsurprisingly, in the combat phase, we've lost the Tortured Souls because they just couldn't take that much damage. And so we now have a bit of a face-off between them. They couldn't really reform very much because they're bloody stuck right next to each other. But over here, we've got this is a bit of a drain life that went off. I think I just took a picture of it too late. Just getting some drain life, why not? It's a piercing spell, and how often do you get a chance to do your 6 drain life with a 6-inch range? Why not? Over here, we've got Zazzy going in, and he's managed to waver. So we can't see the dice number over there, but wavering Zazzy Boy is not actually that difficult, because Zazuzu is 12-14, so as long as you're doing about 5, 6, 7 damage, you're getting to a pretty average dice roll in order to waver him. So he is wavered, which is not helpful for me. He does have Fury, so you can turn and fight him, but he's only got 5 attacks, no crushing or anything like that. So it's turn 4. Time to react to this insult. So, things pretty decisively have occurred. We've got the Cronius turning, because in this, the Cronius will now be able to use a bit of his Drain Life on the Drain Lifer herself. And the guard have done a reform to face her, so hopefully get a charge. But she could just move out of that, So they just turned anyway, so that they can move up to this objective. Then we have the double charge that was foreshadowed before, and we can see that the Abyssal Fiend and Bael went right in. And we have my Zazuzu has just disengaged, moved away, and I've charged in with the Abyssal Ghouls, with the idea, hopefully, that they'll be able to do a bit of damage to him. But he is actually really tough, so it's not going to be possible. But at least they'll remove his nimble. But he can charge anything anyway, because most of the stuff's in his arc. Now this is the critical point where I continued moving back my horsemen, because I was kind of like getting into a bit of a a troll mentality of like, I'll just keep moving back 4 and you won't be able to charge me. But not smart. Not smart. Glucose getting low, JP getting dumb. What I should have done is at this point, this is the junction that perhaps I should have left them there for the Archfiend to charge the horses. Let them. Nothing else. You don't want to play quadruple charge or anything, but just let the Archfiend come in, so then I can hit it back and hopefully completely remove it. Especially if Zazuzu is to survive, he might be able to get a Bane Chant on my horses, and so I'll be doing like 2s. So it'll be like 2s and 2s. Not 2s and 3s, because it'll be a counter charge, no Thunderous. But 2s and 3s, I'm pretty sure I'll be able to remove it. And so that's where I should have been leaving it. But I kept moving it back, because I was kind of, I was getting addicted to the silliness of the whole idea of these cavalry just kind of slowly shuffling back and just mooning even this Archfiend. So, don't get addicted to the silliness of some things. But I've got my Abyssal Guard that are moving around, and I still have the Cronius is about to do his spell. His one spell, an expensive one to be sure. And so, this picture denotes I've just turned this a little bit more just to show the forces arrayed against me and how none of them really have a charge on me. So moving right along onto the combat phase, you can see that Bael and the Archfiend, normal Fiend, it just slips out the tongue, Archfiend, he hasn't got wings. But they were enough to take out those horsemen, because, they just went right in, 7 attacks each, so that's 14 attacks total. They're pretty much identical in this regard. So they got together they hit with 14 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s because they go crushing 2 each, and they both have vicious. So, there's quite a lot of damage that gets through. They're brutal. So got rid of them, and they just turn around. And it just goes to show that Abyssal Horsemen are pretty fragile. They're 14, 16, so it's on the lower end of what heavy cavalry can be. And so they just couldn't take these 2 guys together. And so then I just flip them right around so they can actually get back to the battle. By jumping to this phase, we can also see the fact that I completely failed my Drain Life. So it was the first Drain Life I had to roll, and he didn't manage to do it. So she is still there, and I could have, perhaps waved at her, done something, but she's running around. So in another example of how how bad my army can roll sometimes, I managed to do no damage to Mikael. So I didn't even get rid of his nimble. That was my idea. Just get rid of that nimble. And so I did not. I hit him and did absolutely nothing. So Tortured Souls, Abyssal Guard, they're just both not doing great because, there's no damage counter here. So fantastic. And so, that was the end of my turn. Now, that was the end of turn 4. And then when it went to the next turn, and I'm like about to roll over the dice, I'm like, all right, let's start turn 5. He was like, oh, actually, I don't think it is. I think it's turn 4. And I didn't want to go through my pictures. I was feeling pretty tired. I was like, oh yeah, it probably is. And we did the thing where you're like, well, the unit went here, and then went here, and then went here. So that must be what it is. So it just goes to show that I really need a bigger dice, and definitely keep turning it over reliably so that they know I'm turning it, and we all know where it is. But what that means is that the game actually went, so if we were turn 5, but we're now turn 4, it went a little bit longer than it should have. Like a bit earlier, we should start rolling to see if it keeps going. So the impact of that's negligible, and it was still a fantastic game because, we're taking, as you can see, there's all kinds of units just taking each other. So turn 5 for the Twilight. So what we've got here, there's Mikhail's going in for a second go because he's like, you didn't do anything to me, so I'm going to kill this guy again. And fair enough, I survived the first time. I don't think I can survive the second time because I've already taken so many wounds, and yeah, I got a regen, but it's definitely not enough to survive that much attacks. And then everything else is moving up over here. Did I take a picture of it? I did not, but what I did take a picture of is something interesting, which is that this Impaler unit's like, we gotta go the other way because they've realized that there's not much on this side for them to do. They're going to take ages to get around this, so they're going back the way they've come. There's an objective here worth getting, and so that's the plan right there. So with no surprise to anyone, Zazuzu died on the second charge of Mikhail. He survived the first one, good on him, but he didn't survive the second. And so, but what happened is he overran. He was hoping to just overrun just far enough to get away from the sharpness horses, but he did not, because turn 5, the Abyssal Horses managed to charge him and kill him. So this picture is where I started realizing that, I don't have much time. So I think on the clock it was getting down to 5 minutes, right? And since I thought it was turn 4, because we'd agreed on turn 4, I'm like, oh no, I don't have enough time to finish this game unless I really roll fast. So I was thinking fast, but not thinking well. So what I had is, this is the aftermath. I'd done my turn, and then I'm like, okay, your turn. And, clock off. So what had happened is these guys are charged forward, and right, so they pivot in order to go towards him, but then he aligns to them. They don't have to turn anymore. And so what that meant is that through that charging is, unlike if Mikhail was a normal unit and had a full flank to offer them, they don't turn all the way around, because I think that was what I was hoping, is that they would charge, hit, and then turn, and then maybe get stuck, and then the Archfiend's got a flank. Wonderful. But that didn't happen, and I can reform anyway, so they didn't even need to stay this way. They just turned, and now they're in range of the Archfiend, but not the Butchers. So that's how they went there. Looking at everything else moving around, I did start moving the Cronius onto that objective and moving these guys slowly through the forest, and the Archfiend, I always say Archfiend. The Abyssal Fiend is just kind of mulling around to hold an objective because there's not much else to do. But he is keeping an eye on this Crone, which is off screen, because he has a fireball. Why not try and kill it with a fireball? Because if I can't roll on Drain Life 8, maybe I can roll a Fireball 10. Maybe I just need more dice. But I don't think it works out for me anyway. And Bael's just here to offer support, I think, because he hasn't got much he can do. He can't see the Mind Screechers because the height of this forest exceeds the height of a Mind Screech on a hill, because I think we're playing these forests is very high. So, yeah, not much I can do beyond. But surprise, surprise, guess what? Weight of dice does help. So Fireball 10 was enough to remove. Now, it's probably also because there's the Shattering on top. So, doing any sort of damage, and then you get that +1 with the Shattering, wonderful, because I think she's only 11-13, so removing her is not a tall order, but gosh, do I make it hard for myself. Turn 6 for the Twilightkin. What are they going to do in response? Well, finally, the fight has come down to it. The Archfiend, having range on my horseman, he's finally got them. He charges right in. And this is what I should have let happen earlier when, then I could have just lived with my life. And instead, with this as cover, the Butchers were able to go into the ghouls. It's only a regiment of Butchers, but these ghouls are getting pretty beaten up. They've been lightning bolted, they've been fed into Zazuzu's machinations, and so they haven't got much life left in them. And then over here we have a hindered charge from the Impalers, who are just able to go up, turn, and then ride into them while in the forest. So that's what they've done there to take out my Abyssal Guards. But the Archfiend, as predicted, he's only got the 9 attacks, and then he hits on 3s, he wounds on 2s, but he only got 3 damage on. So that's definitely not enough to worry my horsemen, because even a double 6 just means that, the double 6 would remove them because they're brutal, but that did not occur. Whereas the Butchers went in, did a couple of damage, and then the Impalers went in and did a couple of damage. So overall, nothing too strenuous in terms of how much damage is getting done. I can weather. So turn 6 for the Force of the Abyss, and it's in my mind. We had agreed that this is actually turn 5, so I've got like 3 minutes left on the clock. So I'm going to be playing so fast, and I'm rather stressed trying to figure out how can I try and get this all figured out by then. And so what I've done, I've just got counter charge, everything's going back in to hit. You can see there's a wavering token there, so he managed to do enough damage to waver my ghouls, but they've got Fury, which is pretty good on them. And I've counter charged in with the Abyssal Guard. And then Bael has moved over here to bring that lightning bolt to bear on some of the Mind Screechers. The Cronius is moving up, trying to keep an arc on these Impalers. And I'm holding quite a number of tokens. I'm pretty confident. I've got one here, one here, one here, so that's 3. And yeah, but where are the other ones? There's one behind this building, and there's one, I believe, underneath one of the Mind Screechers over here is holding it. So he's got the 2. And so 3-2, pretty precarious, but that's how it is right now. And so I go back into these guys, do a bit of damage, but don't kill them, which is, not surprising, 12 attacks. These guys go back in, and I don't think they kill him, but they do a lot of damage that I can't see because it's blurry, because it's focusing on the top of his little head instead of on the wound marker instead, which is what's important. But now we can see the damage a bit better here. So we can see that I did 6 damage with the Abyssal Ghouls, which is fantastic, onto those Butchers. That's pretty good. Whereas into the Archfiend I managed to do, we can just see, is a 10 damage. So that's also very good from 18 attacks. So the Sharpeners horses definitely doing their job. Now on to turn 7. And this is where I was getting very frantic in my picture taking, so I apologize from this point onwards. But it's turn 7 for the Twilightkin and Forces of the Abyss. But we're thinking it's turn 6. And I'm really out of the clock. I think I got like 40 seconds to do all my rolls. I was not thinking from this point onwards. So the next picture is actually just the single picture I took for all of that, which is the Twilightkin and Forces of the Abyss. So we'll have to try and bear with me as I talk about what the Twilightkin did and then what the Forces of the Abyss did. This is the problem when you get to the end of the tournament. It's a complicated scenario. You're taking too many pictures. You're a bit silly, and you haven't eaten. Definitely make sure you eat. So what occurred here in his turn? So you can already see that this Mind Screech has gone on down to get to that objective that's right here, because he saw that my Cronius was going for it and could very well take it from him. So he had gone down there. He had gone back in with his charge. To try and kill my Abyssal Guard, because he doesn't want to let the Abyssal Guard go on and take that objective, and that's what he did in his turn for movement. Then in terms of damage, he managed to take out those Abyssal Ghouls with these Butchers, which is very good. They've done their job getting through those Abyssal Ghouls. Now they're ready to take on the rest, but he probably won't. He'll just have them sit there because now he has the objective right there. And then it became... And he attacked back with his Archfiend, but I didn't take a picture of it, so obviously the Archfiend didn't kill my Abyssal Horsemen, and I can tell you it didn't. So my Abyssal Horsemen are ready to attack in response. And so then in my turn, this turn 7, I charged here with my Cronius, so the Cronius went bang right in, and then I wanted to charge these guys here, but where the manifestation of Bael was before, he couldn't see past this forest. And I was like, oh yeah, right. Sorry, I can't charge there. Because I did move him there initially, I'm frantically like, oh, I'll move there, I won't flank charge him. And then he's like, oh, no, you can't see it. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, the forest is in the way. Because we take the trees off and you start to think it's not a forest, right? But stupid me, these guys are in the forest enough that there's the corner of these guys, if they were flush, they're not, because we're both poking over a bit, so they actually should be in the forest and I should be able to charge them. But when you've got a few seconds on the clock, you're not going to be arguing the semantics. So I was like, yeah, sure. So I moved him in here instead to get a lightning bolt off and maybe remove the Butchers, because they've got some damage on them, and I thought, well, if I can remove them, then at least it's then that's one less thing he's got an objective. So that was the plan there, was to just shoot them off with a lightning bolt, which I shouldn't have even been bothering, because you got to roll an extra dice in the range phase. So yeah, meanwhile we've got the Abyssal Guard just sitting on this objective, the Abyssal Fiend is sitting on the other one, so I've definitely got 2, but now this is a contested one and he's got 2, so the Butcher and the Mind Screech off screen. And this is just to show that my Abyssal Horseman in my turn 7, so this, he's the first turn, and then I'm the second. He's the first half of the turn, and I'm the second half of the turn. So my turn 7, I managed to kill and just reform to face these butchers, thinking that there was going to be maybe a turn 7, but I don't have the dice to roll it. Jeez, I don't have the time. But that's what I was hoping, just to get on there. I have more unit strength, that's for sure. And so then we roll for turn 8, bang. And in this turn 8, because we thought it was turn 7, so we rolled for turn 7, I'd actually clocked off. So in that last picture, I was done. Like, dice down, it was over. And I was like, oh, bugger. And so I was like, oh, how's he going to get out of this? So in his turn 8, because we rolled for the turn 7 and said, yes, it's turn 7, all he needed to do, as we identified, was he simply needed to just back these guys up within the 3 inches of that token, and he's got it. So he would back up and take that. And so he would have that objective. But yes, it's turn 8 doesn't actually exist in Kings of War, so it would have stopped when it was a draw. Which is, the difference between a draw and a win. Oh, and his win, my loss, and it's the last turn, like last game. I was drained, but I was having a lot of fun because it's just, we managed to finally have this small tournament after all the lockdowns. So I didn't really mind. But yeah, I was pretty convinced that, we were both convinced that that it was turn 7 here, not turn 8. But yeah, so all he needed to do was just back up, which is very smart. Disengage, scoot on over, bring his unit strength 3 into that contested area, so then he now has the superior unit strength and takes it. So that was smart. So that's how the game ended. And yeah, so my opponent Tim, he was fantastic the whole time. Like, he's brilliant. There was banter. we're still cracking jokes even though we're both dead tired, and it just made the whole experience really good. And so I was never really in a mood. Because we're just having so much fun that I wasn't willing to be like, oh no, actually I think I could do this. Also I didn't have the time, which is down to me. I'm just getting slow. I'm not rolling fast. I'm not taking pictures at the right times. And so it just got me really down. But anyway, not down as in depressed, down as in time and speed. But in any case, so that means for the whole event, I won my first game and then coasted on to a smooth, and then I really lost my second game to Damien Madigan, who had his amazing Northern Alliance list. And then I closely, as we can see, lost this last game. It could have been a draw, so it could have been win, lose, draw, and it would have been completely even, which would have been cool. But, I'm also cool with just the almost loss here. So maybe in my heart I'll count it as a draw, but it's okay. These tournaments happen quite often, and so hopefully we'll have another one. There was one that was going to happen in early January, but unfortunately that was cancelled. I wasn't going to go to it anyway, but it was postponed, I guess. But chances are it'll happen February, March, and so I'm going to be going to that and definitely take pictures of those to bring this this tasty content to you. But yeah, so it was the next tournament after this was the Clash of Kings Australia 2022 tournament event. So that is going to be really exciting. I've got 6 games. So I'm going to be talking about 6 games. It's going to be 6 videos. I might condense them down because the 6 videos is going to take too long to record separately. So it would be cool to try and do it all at once, but then I have to sit down and talk for that long. You don't want to listen to me. So yeah, I'll think about it. But I've got 6 games worth of pictures to turn into content for you guys, and I can show you how well I went at my first 6 game tournament. I've never done 3 and 3, so that's 3 games in one day, 3 games in another day. I've never done that many games at all in any weekend in my life in any game system, so that was a first time for that. And I definitely took a different list, a very different list to what I took here, because Clash of Kings came out and I saw some of the cool, tasty stuff in that for the Force of the Abyss, and I decided to take those rather than my standard kind of list that I usually take. So you'll get to see how well that goes and how those different components work. And so I think I'm really excited to talk to you about all that content there. But for now, this tournament didn't end so great, but I'm learning my skills. For instance, looking back, learned about how gargoyles should be used, and also learned how they definitely should not be used. Do not throw them away to chaff nothing. Like, what am I doing? So please, like and subscribe. Give me a comment, tell me how dumb I was and all the different movement shenanigans I was doing, but you're talking to past me who was, definitely getting hypoglycemic because I hadn't had any food. So whatever I can do to improve my gameplay apart from the gargoyles. Definitely tell me how I should use those gargoyles instead, and that would be fantastic. Perhaps they could have just been sitting around protecting my horsemen so that the horsemen could get the charge on the Archfiend. Huh? Wouldn't that have been cool? Yes, JP, it would have been really cool if you did it properly. But I didn't, you know? That's how it works. So that would have been the best. But unfortunately, it didn't eventuate. Because, yeah, charge on an Archfiend. Gosh. Anyway, all done. I'll stop thinking about it. And it's on to the next series of battle reports that you'll see on this channel. See yas!